When you need to know what's going on around the world, stay with Weekends with Jason Olbourne on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, hello, good afternoon from Australia, good evening, good morning, wherever you are watching and listening to TNT from around the world. My name is Jason Olbourne and I'm presenting Weekends here on the one and only TNT Radio. And there will be a lot of new people tuning in, either in this hour or in others, because I've got 4 brand new guests to the station today. And what a great show we have planned for you. So much to talk about, so many things happening. Good news, bad news, sad news all around the world. The only place where you are able to get it all 24/7 with the perspective, without the nonsense, without the bias, and without the establishment hanging over our heads telling us what to do, say, and think. We do it all for ourselves. So many different issues that are happening and so many ways to look at them in ways that we can understand better. Did you catch the Terrence Howard interview this week on Joe Rogan? Certainly caused a bit of controversy, over 6 million views there, scientific community falling over themselves to call the man insane. And as usual, there is the controlled opposition set on social media, also warning us that Terrence Howard is a psyop. Well, a breath of fresh air. The man is turning things upside down in so many different areas, and it's wonderful that Rogan is able to provide someone of Terrence's stature, let's say, a big movie star, the opportunity to talk about his work for 3 hours and open up that door. Well, TNT, of course, we do the same thing here. Our format, hour by hour, working through with so many different presenters, different topics, etc., from all parts of the world. So a completely different format, and I'm delighted that you're able to join me here today. Well, let me tell you, coming up in the second hour, Dr. David Richards, an Australian doctor, will be joining me. He's headed up at the Australians for Science and Freedom, and he's going to talk about a range of issues, including the excess deaths inquiry in the Australian Senate, for which he and other doctors have submitted their contribution to the excess deaths inquiries. I'll talk to him about that and some other issues. And in the third hour today, John Glynn from Justice Matters, who he set up and founded here in New South Wales, is going to talk about injustice in this country and provide real examples of things happening to people all around the world and in Australia, and what he and his organisation is doing about it, and at the same time still being pro-police. So he's not some crazy person out there just trying to knock institutions over. He's just dealing with the real things in real time based on real facts, and you'll be amazed and surprised by what he's been able to expose and to bring to us today. And in the final hour, I'm delighted to have Aidan Killian on the show, who is an Irish comedian, storyteller and filmmaker. He made the film Once Upon a Lockdown, and it is a charming, beautiful film. You'd never think that a documentary made about the lockdowns could be, and I encourage you to watch that at 4 p.m. this afternoon when it will play out. But my first guest this hour is a brand new guest to TNT and to obviously this show, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Bruce Snyder. He is an American independent news reporter. He began working in broadcast news in the 1990s, where he started as a camera operator and video editor. Then he moved on to producing and directing live television events in news, music, and sports. He's the owner of his own media company called Mind Fixed Entertainment, and he also hosts his own news podcast show called the Bruce Snyder Podcast on Mind Fixed TV. He'll also be directing his first feature film next year. It's going to be called Worthy, and it's about spiritual warfare. And the reason that he decided to get into news reporting full-time is due to the current political landscape in America. And he also says that in addition, he's been a very strong supporter and advocate of Julian Assange. And it feels like that it is his responsibility to stand up for what is right and report the truth to the world. Bruce Snyder, welcome to Weekends and to TNT.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here today.
Well, what a thrill, Bruce, to have you on the show. You have dedicated your life to working in television and got so many skills along the way. So in many ways, you can become your own, one-stop shop, if you will. But to understand how the industry works and then to realize that you can make as much of a contribution in front of the camera as you can behind it, it's a great skill to have developed along the way. Can I ask you, how did you realize that you needed to be the person in front of the camera rather than behind it?
That is a great question. When I decided to originally go into broadcast television school and learn everything behind the scenes, my calling is to be exactly that, behind the scenes. I love everything about it. And by the way, kudos to your team. When I was in the green room, what a professional job you guys do at TNT Radio. It's fantastic. But there came a moment, and to be honest with you, it was with Donald Trump. And when Donald Trump came into the scene, and maybe the first year, I'm like, I'm going to stay away from it. I decided not to even post politics to my social media pages. But then when the storm, if you will, started, and they turned on the left side, turned on all their assets, I realized, my goodness gracious, they're going after this man. And so then I had to decide I have to get out of my comfort zone and start being in front of the camera, reporting the news. And here I am today.
It's a terrific story, and it's not necessarily isolated. Bruce, my story is quite similar. I was, and I say this often, I was a Bernie Sanders fan until he capitulated at the convention when he promised to contest it. And went into it, and I openly admit it, went into a deep, dark depression for many months, wondering what's going to happen when Hillary Clinton becomes the president, knowing what we knew at that stage. And when Trump became president, I couldn't believe it. I was the only election I'd never watched the results. I could not face it. That's how much it deeply affected me. So when my wife told me that Trump had won, I almost fell off the chair. I just couldn't believe it. Now, what I found fascinating, of course, was that very early on in his presidency, he wiped out the Trans-Pacific Partnership, just wrote it off. And that said to me, amazingly, that this was the end of globalism, first strike, that this man is going to take them down, that therefore he's doing something against the establishment. They're not going to like it. And I felt like that there was genuinely someone in the Oval Office who was not part of the establishment. And of course, we saw with the calls at the inauguration that they were already trying to impeach him, that something was very, very amiss in US politics. So what started was the beginning of 4 years of fireworks, and whether or not Trump would be up for it. And we certainly learnt that he was. For mine, unfortunately, like many people, draining the swamp is the only thing that we've all been a little bit let down by. And that's the reason why we focus on justice and injustice, etc. And that's also why many of us were following Julian Assange during this period, because, of course, Julian Assange, the Podesta files and various other situations exposed Pizzagate, with the Podesta files, which of course was knocked on its head. But because it was WikiLeaks, who's never been sued for defamation, there was certainly more smoke where there was fire in that situation. Looking at all of that, therefore, how did you discover the merits of Assange yourself and become so interested in his case?
Well, once I realized when Julian Assange came onto the scene, and then obviously he put out what he did, mainly, the video that was released through Chelsea Manning and the horrific war crimes that we witnessed. I have to be honest, I also saw Roger Waters from Pink Floyd being a big advocate for Julian Assange. I know he can be controversial to some people. I understand that. But put that aside, I started going down that particular path of researching Julian and seeing what he stood for, and is it something that I can get on the same side of? And after doing all that, I realized right now Julian Assange is, in my book, is a hero. What he has done, he falls in that same category as Edward Snowden. You have Edward Snowden, who has to live in Russia right now and hide, because that's the only place he's going to have safety right now. And what Edward Snowden did too is he pretty much exposed what the NSA and what the Patriot Act and everything that's going on and spying on Americans. And he had to flee for his life. So as far as Julian Assange goes, I've been a strong advocate for him on all of my platforms for years now. I have kept up with it. I have posted many, many times about freeing Julian Assange, bringing up his court hearings, and letting my audience know everything that is happening, because you're never going to get that in the American mainstream media. Never. So it is our job. It is our duty. And going back to your original question of me getting in front of the camera, that is what is so important for what I do today. I realize I'm very grateful for the opportunity, just like right now, being on your show, being in front of the camera, and having a platform. And it takes, you got to take that with a great responsibility. And I do that every single day. So, Julian Assange in my book, again, I think that's somebody that I absolutely look up to. As far as his recent situation, he just won an appeal, which looks great. That's wonderful. But the problem with that is, and I'm a realist, is that I see what is going on here between the UK and the United States, and all they're doing, in my personal opinion, is prolonging the inevitable, which is keeping Julian Assange locked up in a prison. My guesstimate is they want to extradite him to the United States. I don't think they will under the Biden administration because it would look worse for him. If I did see some rumblings about, which is just rumors, but Biden pardoning Assange, and maybe that's how he's going to get votes. I wouldn't put it past him. But as far as that goes, again, Julian Assange is something that every single person, every single American on my side, everywhere, where you're at, Australia, they need to know exactly who this man is, what he represents, and what he has gone through. Because right now, the mainstream media in the U.S. and around the world, I'm sure, is the enemy. And it's up to independent journalism, independent reporters to get the truth out. And that is exactly why we have big tech censorship shutting us down all the time.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And the Julian Assange story is one of those catalysts to create independent news and to reinvent the wheel, if you will. I mean, there are disruptors across all industries. We saw it with Uber taking on the taxi cab industry. We've seen it in many other industries. So why not, in terms of news, being able to disrupt? I mean, this is what the internet is all about. And it makes so much sense that what we need to do at the same time whilst taking a platform, but honouring that situation like we're doing here and you're doing, and to be able to become better at delivering the news than the establishment is. And to quote from the great film Field of Dreams, if you build it, he will come. And it seems that this is the point of what we're doing. The Assange story is something else because he did something that had never really been seen or done before, and WikiLeaks emerged, and this information was coming out, and so much truth that many of us were thinking, goodness me, what's going on? But as you rightly mentioned, when he was able to expose US war crimes caught or captured on video, and you realize what's really going on here. This is the great dilemma, that governments are allowed to keep secrets from the public, and those that blow the whistle and expose them are the ones that are getting punished. How is it that you get to say your whole life, don't shoot the messenger, and then go about doing exactly the opposite and going after the messenger in this case? How do you feel, therefore, about the US government going after him and covering up war crimes?
There's a lot of controversy with that right now. I have to form my own personal opinion. I think everybody has to come to that conclusion themselves. That's why, again, it's important for everybody to do their own research and dig into this and understand what is going on. As far as in U.S., the government right now, we have a lot of things that are pulling me personally in every direction. You hear things about Mike Pompeo being involved in a hit on Julian Assange when he was at the Ecuadorian embassy. You know, people question, why did Donald Trump pardon Julian Assange prior to him leaving office? Those are great questions. So I think as far as Donald Trump goes and him coming back in, I hope and pray that he does pardon Julian Assange. I think personally, Trump under his first term, he was surrounded by probably a lot of the wrong people influencing him not to do certain things. I think coming into a second term, he'll know what to do, what people to put in place. I've said in his first term, he exposed the swamp. In his second term, he is going to drain the swamp. And hopefully he can do things like pardon folks like Julian Assange, even Edward Snowden, bringing him home. But they have to be safe at the same time when they come back. So it is very difficult to put any trust into the U.S. government right now when it comes to that. So it's up to, I think, the one thing that is keeping Julian Assange alive right now and not being extradited to a U.S. prison where he's thrown into a dark hole is the people, especially there in the UK. They have been vocal since day one. They have not given up, and they will not let this go. That's why the U.S. government right now is in a tough situation. they hope when the story breaks, like the magnitude of a Julian Assange, that it will leave the American conscience and people will forget about it, and they'll slowly just rip him away and people will forget. The people have not allowed not allowed the U.S. government to do something like that. So thank goodness for the people who rise up. There are so many, and Stella, his wife, Stella Assange, and what she's done, incredible, inspiring. I get it. She doesn't have. We may not be on the same lines of political views and beliefs, but it has really nothing to do with that. It's about Julian Assange and what he did. And again, I will always vision him as the, what do you want to call it? The poster boy, if you will, for independent media. And I think the least I can do, I can't do much. He's sitting in a prison, but the least I can do is report the news, get the truth out there. And that's all he ever wanted to do.
Yeah, well said, Bruce. We're going to take our first break, and when we return, we're going to continue with this discussion. We're also going to talk about a number of other issues, including latest developments in the Ukraine war, and we are going to get into the US election and politics that's happening over there. In the meantime, why not give TNT Radio a follow? We're on all the major social platforms, including Facebook, X, Instagram, Gab, and Getter. Help us get the word out as we cover the biggest topics of our time on today's News Talk TNT.
TNT's James Freeman.
Hundreds of protesters have gathered at London's High Court today to hear the judgment on the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, and if he will be extradited to the United States. Now, the news that's come through literally in the past 10 minutes is that the two judges ruling on the case have declared that they are not satisfied by the US assurances and that Assange has been granted leave for appeal. It is a win of sorts, I guess, because it means he gets to appeal whether he'll get extradited. This was just to find out if he actually had the right to appeal it. So this is not game over. This is just one battle in a long war. But what it does mean is that Julian Assange will not be extradited imminently to the US, which is clearly amazing news.
James Freeman on today's News Talk TNT. A better business tip from TNT Radio. The benefits of advertising on today's News Talk TNT Radio should be clear to businesses of any shape or size. It can be accessed anywhere, anytime, by anybody, and is the perfect way to build brand awareness and stimulate digital activity. If you'd like more information about advertising on TNT Radio, simply fill out your details on our contact page and we'll be in touch. To find out more, go to tntradio.live. The conversation continues.
I don't believe it, and I think that's a terrible position that I am in, that I don't trust my government.
This is today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back to Weekends. My guest this hour, all the way from Ohio in the US, is Bruce Snyder, who heads Mindfix TV Entertainment. It's a whole different way of looking at the news and entertainment. And Bruce has spent many years behind the camera. Now he's in front of it. Bruce, you might not be aware, but last week on this show, I had JFK researcher, author Jim DiEugenio, who happened to be the screenwriter for Oliver Stone's JFK Revisited, amongst other things. And he revealed, talking about his new book, Chokeholds, that Trump never released all of the JFK files because when asked, he said, if you saw what I saw, you wouldn't have revealed them either, which is an astonishing announcement. Now, Jim also said that Tucker Carlson, when discussing this, said that he was called by Mike Pompeo, who told him to drop the story. That is a huge revelation, considering what you just brought up about Pompeo and Assange before the break.
Yeah, look, I'm very much on the fence when it comes to Mike Pompeo. I know most Americans are totally against him. They think he's a traitor. I get that, and I understand that. I'd like to take a step back and look at things again. We don't know the absolute truth if he did put a hit on Julian Assange, and when at the time he was a director of the CIA. But also, as far as what you just told me about that goes back to my point where I think Trump was surrounded with some of the wrong people. I think we're going to know it very soon because right down the pipeline. We're about to get his VP, and then we're going to, of course, find out who's going to be in his cabinet. So, and there's a lot of names out there. I know Pompeo has recently gone on American television and said he would be open to having another job in the Trump administration. So if Trump puts him on board, I think that me personally, I'm going to think that it wasn't exactly what he intended. So, but at the same time, it's very hard to trust the U.S. government right now. You're talking about the JFK files and, the statement that he made. That's a big statement as well. But then again, was Trump around the wrong people, influenced not to do things like pardon Julian Assange or release the JFK files? So.
Exactly. Now, look, there's so much to sort of work through in this, and we might just change the order of our planned stories this hour. And we'll continue because you mentioned the idea of Trump announcing his running mate, and this is a really interesting scenario because off the bat, people were wondering, would he pull someone from perhaps left field? Names like Tulsi Gabbard, who left the Democrats to become an independent, was one such name. Would be really, really interesting. Certainly make for a great vice presidential debate, if anything else, against Kamala Harris, given that it was Tulsi Gabbard that ended her presidential aspirations in an earlier debate. Another name that of an outsider was RFK Jr., who has come out and said absolutely under no circumstances would he consider being Trump's running mate. But what's interesting is that RFK is playing to win and he wants to be president of the United States. So this is an interesting story. But have you got any names on a short list, or is there an official short list of names here?
As far as America goes, right now, a lot of people are throwing names around, like a Tulsi Gabbard, for instance. Of course, you saw the young, new, fresh folks come on, like Vivek Ramaswamy come on there. People are throwing that name around. Tim Scott. I personally think it's going to be somebody that's probably going to surprise a lot of people. Now, I have been very vocal as well. I'm a General Michael Flynn fan. And I know a lot of people can be on the fence about him too, but I think about when I look at General Flynn, he was the first person, with the exception of Trump, of the day of Trump's inauguration in his first presidency, they were basically impeaching Trump while he was being sworn in. And then immediately they went after Michael Flynn. So that's a big tell right there. So if the left, the deep state is going after Michael Flynn, they have reason to do so because they're absolutely in panic mode. So here's General Flynn, pardoned by Trump, on the stage right now. I think General Flynn will get an absolute position in the Trump administration. I'm also very open to him being a vice president as well. You're looking at two people. You mentioned something about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not technically a politician. He is a businessman. He says that in his rallies all the time. Of course, he's a politician now, but he puts the people first. He's all about the business. This is why when Donald Trump came into the scene, I told my late wife, I said, this is fantastic because what he's going to do to the U.S. economy is going to be unbelievable. And then, of course, you had peace throughout the entire Middle East, which for me personally was mind-blowing. People didn't just understand. I said, the peace that they're implementing through the Middle East is unprecedented right now. But then I put in somebody like a Michael Flynn, who's not a politician as well. So you got two people like that. We'll see. Nobody really knows, but I'm a Michael Flynn fan.
It's absolutely fascinating, the selection of a vice president, because the one thing that Trump does, given that he can only run for 4 years, is that he has the opportunity to pick his successor. And whilst people might say, a J.D. Vance, somebody like that, but is that a person that's going to be the next president of the United States? And goodness me, if there was ever a need for a military president down the track, somebody like General Michael Flynn certainly fits that bill more than ever, and just the shock that it would send through Washington alone blows my mind. That this possibility. The one thing that I often talk about is that Kennedy is playing coy regarding VP, but I really love the idea that he may become Trump's attorney general. Have you thought about who might be his attorney general?
I have thought about that, and I really think it's the strong possibility will be Kash Patel. I was just talking about this recently. I think they're going to put Kash Patel probably in like an AG role. He's definitely going to get, he's one of those other people that is going to get a role in the Trump administration, whether it has something to do or with the Department of Justice, perhaps. So right around there. But I think I can see Kash Patel being the AG under the Trump administration. And it's, again, it's terrifying for these people. You put in a Michael Flynn and you put in a Kash Patel who's been very vocal about coming after these folks and making sure that they are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And that's why right now on American television right now, okay, you have news reporters that are coming on from CNN, MSNBC, and all the other mainstream media networks, and they're literally panicking on air. We have celebrities in the U.S. like Robert De Niro who really think that Trump is coming after him once they get in. This is why they're labeling him as an extremist and putting the label of Hitler on him right now. They're very scared. They don't know what to do. And then you have, if you really want to go further, we have elites around the world, like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, building underground bunkers. So what are they going to do? I mean, are they going to hide? Do they know something that's coming? Whatever's coming, Trump is going to have a strong attorney general. He's going to have a strong vice president. And you were right, Jason, when you said it. What's most important about the VP pick as well is down the line. This is going to be more than just another 4-year election. Like you said, same with now. We're thinking 8 years, 12 years down the road, because we cannot allow for the left to come back in and undo what Donald Trump is about to do in 4 years. We have to secure this thing. People have to, I think the world is awakening, and they're not going to go back down this road in voting for these corrupt politicians.
It can only be a breath of fresh air and part two of the situation. It's really interesting when we look at the calls for justice and the panic, as you mentioned, of people like Robert De Niro, for whatever indiscretions may or may not be, and we don't have to get into all of that. But what I find interesting, though, is that this is what I talked about to Dave Hayes, praying medic, on the show a couple of months back, about the real reason or the value of Q, if you will. It was one thing to predict all these things, but what it seemed to do was to get inside the heads of these establishment characters, which has led them to kind of go with these false moves. One such is Robert De Niro with this open panic. That's what I think was the real benefit. Whatever we think or know what Q is or was, this was the great thing because it unsettled them, Bruce.
Yes, I agree with that. As far as the Q movement goes, I'm very vocal about that on my social media pages. I have posted those coincidences that really tie into the Q drops. I think the Q drops were made for information, for people, provided to the public for the first time in history, provided to the public. People can go and start researching. There's so much on there that you can research and find out. I also think it is an absolute psyop for what you said, for the other side, for them to panic, mislead them, misdirect them, just like a magician, and not knowing what's coming next. And here we are in 2024, less than 6 months away from the U.S. presidential election, and these folks are panicking. They're jumping ship. You're seeing resignations coming in now. And I think the closer we get, day by day, hour by hour, people in the Department of Justice, the FBI, all those 3-letter agencies, they are going to be in a situation they're like, man, do I need to either start telling the truth or get out now? Because they know down the pipeline, Donald Trump is coming. And this is why it will not be an easy walk between now and November 5th, when the U.S. elections take place. We don't know what's coming, but most Americans realize something's coming to try and stop that election.
That's a really interesting point there, Bruce, that you bring up about what may be coming. We've seen this week here in Australia, for example, announcements of a couple of cases of H5N1 bird flu to try and instill the panic. There was an announcement that there's a new COVID variant called Flirt, goodness me. And it seems that the only people that seem to worry about it are those that are up to, booster 5, 6 or 7, whereas the unvaccinated community is just sort of laughing and mocking at it. And what I find interesting is on more and more mainstream social media pages. If you just look at the emojis in the left corner where people hit the like button, you'll often see that the laugh emoji sits first, followed by the like emoji. So it's gone the other way now because that ranks them in order of number. So if more people are laughing at a post about something, that's the general sentiment. Then if you look down and there's 100 comments, 1,000 comments, whatever there are, then that tells you that this is really permeating into society. They don't want a bar of this new information. So have you considered what, or are there pointers out there of what may be used to interrupt the election? Of course, we're going to talk in the next segment about Ukraine, and I am, of course, worried or wondering, therefore, because of these moves and counter moves, and we'll probably discuss that shortly, if you think it might be a military thing or if it's a pandemic, but it always feels manufactured. It's not something we're just predicting and it's just going to blow in from left field out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah, I really think that people are awake to it right now. I realize there's still a lot of people who are asleep. There are people who are programmed who will automatically get in line right now for another shot because another variant is released. They'll put on their mask. They'll do the 6 feet social distancing. They're programmed that way. Unfortunately, there are people who live in fear. When COVID came around, I knew people lived in fear, but I had no idea the amount of fear that people lived in. And we got to see it on the world stage. As far as what they're going to do, I don't think they're going to be able to get away with another variant. I think people are awake. They're not going to fall for that again. So I don't know if they do try it, it's going to be quite interesting. But at the same time, I think the only thing, and I'm not a fear mongering person. I don't do that on my channels, but at the same time, if they release a variant that is deadly, then it's a whole new different ball game. I know you want to get into the next segment with the Ukraine, but recently we just had on May 20th, Zelensky is technically no longer the president of Ukraine. He has abolished the elections, of course, the other political party, and it's under martial law there. So now he's basically, what most people don't know, he's a dictator right now. But you're never going to hear that on American television. But at the same time, that is why right now Putin wants to sit down, have a ceasefire, but he won't sit down with Zelensky now because his term as president has expired. So that comes back to your question, what can happen here in the U.S. leading up to the presidential election? Something like that, where an event, I don't know what that event may be, whether it's the scale of a 9/11 event, whatever it is, putting in martial law to where it stops people from going to the polls and Biden carrying over and being that next president. But then again, I'm also on the fence. More so, I'm more leaning towards it that Biden will not be the 2024 candidate for the presidential election. I see that coming down this summer, perhaps by August, where he will step aside. You'll know at that first debate, if they allow him to sink, if they throw him under the bus and Trump eats him alive, that will be their excuse. We need to get him out and we're going to bring in a new candidate.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting and sharp analysis there, Bruce, because many people are obviously speculating as this is going, but it's more than speculation when you're looking at somebody who's got clear cognitive deficit amongst many other glaring problems, not least of which is his polling numbers are through the floor and getting worse every single day. He has possibly the weakest vice president in US history, and there's been some pretty poor ones along the way there. But Kamala Harris takes it to a whole new level. Yes. Given that, Bruce, have you formed, or is there form for somebody to take that role? Do you think that they're going to pre-select the person, or will they have to go into some sort of miniature primary event?
That's a great question. Now, there was something that I posted the other day, and I don't have that information in front of me. There is a loophole. Apparently, right now, where I'm at in Ohio, Ohio has decided not to have Joe Biden on the ballot. They have to register 90 days prior, to the election. Apparently, from what I understand, the current administration, the Biden administration, wants to register in Ohio 75 days, prior. There's that small window, which falls into August, They can apparently, from what I understand, and I don't want everybody to hold me to this, but I do believe, I'm pretty confident I am correct, There is a window. Once they get so many days close to that November 5th date, they can slip in a candidate without having to go through a primary. So they can bring in anybody that they want to at that point. And who that person will be, there's been a lot of speculation in the U.S., whether it's Hillary Clinton, Michelle Obama, Gavin Newsom, or perhaps, in my opinion, they love celebrities and they might throw up a Hail Mary pass and bring in some big name because, unfortunately, Americans love that celebrity stuff. And I don't, but they do. And so does the left. They love their celebrities. So who knows what they'll do, because I know that they even entertained Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson at one point. They courted him here in America. They did. And I'm like, these people are insane. So, but we'll see what happens.
Extraordinary. One would wonder if they're going to try and wheel out Oprah Winfrey and bundle her with someone else. I mean, it's shocking, isn't it, Bruce, to think that
it's shocking.
Yeah, I mean, Oprah Winfrey, the campaign would be very simple. We're just going to run the John of God promo, and that would be the end of Oprah Winfrey. It's a bit like when you run Michelle Obama. We'll just run all those Harvey Weinstein praising clips, and that would have to be the end of Michelle Obama. It is a very, very crazy world. What we're going to do is take another break, and we'll come back very shortly, and we'll continue our conversation here with Bruce Snyder. You're watching and listening to Weekends here on TNT.
Sometimes a car comes along that changes everything, with innovations never thought possible and features that make you wonder, how did people survive without this? This is that time, and this is that car. This is the world's first DWB. Equipped with transparent doors to eliminate reasonable suspicion, whatever that means. A 10-2 steering wheel that keeps hands visible at all times. We remove the glove box so there's no confusion about what the driver is reaching for. With a touch of a button, the ultrasonic biometric scanner displays the license and registration of the driver to ensure contactless exchange of information. With no trunk, nothing can be concealed, so therefore, there is nothing to search and seize. To ensure you'll never be mistaken for breaking the speed limit, we've installed limited edition airless tires. And we removed the engine because, honestly, why risk it? DWB, the first vehicle of its kind, where the safety feature is the car itself.
I have a feeling these are the suspects in question. The two occupants look like the people involved in the armed robbery. I'm approaching the vehicle. Request backup. The driver matches the description because of a wide-set nose.
Hi. I'm your retirement fear. But don't be scared. You're still in pre-retirement.
Does that mean I have more time to plan?
Precisely. Here, this is pretirement.org.
Retirement savings options? Potential tax breaks?
Move.
This isn't scary. I'm doing it.
You got this.
Visit thisispretirement.org for free resources to help you customize your action plan.
The intersection of information and conversation. Weekends with Jason Olbourne on today's News Talk, TNT.
Welcome back to Weekends. My guest this hour, independent journalist from Ohio in the United States, Bruce Snyder. Bruce, in 1997, I made my first trek to what I call the greatest city in the world. That was New York City. And I went and met up with one of my friends I went to school with here in Australia, who had since become a New York lawyer. And he told me the story of Rudy Giuliani. Now, both of us were big lefties. And it sort of irked us that somebody, a Republican like Rudy Giuliani, would be the one responsible for cleaning up New York City and making it into the great city in what I would call its heyday. There was no more graffiti on the subway. The cities were safe. He'd already gone through with his what people called zero tolerance, but what was really the mobilization of the police force, which he talked about in his book, Leadership. Now, you fast forward to 2024, and New York City is no longer the greatest city in the world. It's probably not even in the top 10 best cities in the United States anymore. Can you tell us what's going on there? And do you smell an air of change in the winds?
Well, look, I obviously I'm not a resident of New York City. Been there several times. Love the city. I love when I used to go there. Have family out there, as a matter of fact. Talk to them quite frequently, and I can tell you that. And I have a lot of folks who follow me from New York, and they always display um, their their disappointment, if you will. That's the word I'm looking for. So, as far as New York goes right now, it reminds me sort of back to the 70s. Very crime ridden again. Of course, now we have the influx of illegals who are being imported, if you will, into New York and around our whole country for that matter. But New York right now, I'm vocal about it. I know Trump used a word when he came in onto the scene about Haiti being a something hole, and I kind of said it was a something hole as well right now. I still think, as far as the city goes, I think there's a lot of great people there. I know a lot of the people that live there, but at the same time, they have some serious problems right now. And as far as that mayor goes, Adams, he is, in my opinion, out of his element right now. He doesn't know what he is doing. He doesn't know left from right. And today, for example, there was a campaign because I saw Eric Adams, I saw Nancy Pelosi, I saw Joe Biden, I saw Kamala Harris. They all posted about George. I guess I didn't know this. It's George Floyd Day here in America, and they're talking about putting out the Policing Act. And they went on there, and their language on X, on the platform X, is very much about division. It has nothing to do with about the Policing Act. And I know it's controversial. People can get into that whole story, but they're creating division still right now. And as far as that goes, I think the only Policing Act that needs to be done in America is the policing of these corrupt politicians we need to hold them accountable. New York is falling into a pit right now. It is a very dangerous place to be. I wouldn't want to go there right now as well. I have seen so many countless very credible videos, not just the typical videos that surface online. I know where to look, and I'm fortunate to have people who send me very informative clips that are authentic. Right now, the illegals over there are getting, and it's around the country too, they're getting everything, and they've taken over everything. The housing, there's hotels, it's unbelievable. As a matter of fact, they've really kicked their homeless to the curb. They've kicked everybody to the curb. Right now, it's about the illegals that are coming in. It's terrible what is happening right now. We're living in very dangerous times, and it's a shame that as far as New York or any place else, even in LA, out in California, these tourist destinations that everybody would want to go to at one time, the great places to go and visit, have now become, we need to stay far away. We don't want to go into those places.
It's incredibly sad to think that anyone who's been to New York City will understand what you're saying. And anyone who's ever thought about it and seen it in the countless films and TV shows, it's one of the ultimate destinations to travel to. Yes. There's just nothing quite like New York City, but yes. It's a far cry from its heyday. I find it fascinating and incredibly upsetting that two of New York's favourite sons, who probably have contributed more to that city than anyone else, Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor, who's now facing these ridiculous indictments at the age of 80 over the election, and of course Donald Trump, who technically rebuilt New York City, and you may even argue single-handedly, if anyone wants to read The Art of the Deal, to get an understanding of what he went through in that process. To think that he's technically been ostracized from the city and relocated to Florida, it just blows my mind. And you've even got Trump coming out saying he's considering moving to Texas. That there's even feeling, feeling the pinch there in Florida. It's just extraordinary to think that this is how far we've gone. What bugs me though, Bruce, is the short memory of people to think that that you would have to think that Rudy Giuliani in New York City should have been treated as a life patron just for what he did leading up to during his term, and of course through 9/11, how he managed that suffering that people were going through. Even that, he just looked a head and shoulders above everybody else.
Yes, I agree with that completely. You look at, like you said, you mentioned Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani out of New York. I have great respect for Rudy Giuliani. Something happened along the way. Donald Trump was well-loved. As soon as he stepped into that spotlight to run for president, of course, he was a joke in the beginning, but when he won, it was full-blown panic, and it's still full-blown panic to this very day. I think folks like Rudy Giuliani, deserve absolutely our respect and our gratitude. I thought he was an incredible leader during 9/11. And you look at all his other accolades as well, as far as taking in court and taking on the mob, if you will. So there are many things that he did to achieve the status that he has. Again, I think when they turned on Trump, they turned on people like Rudy Giuliani. This is part of people have to understand, okay? This is part of a major psychological warfare. It is a campaign that's been launched a long time ago, and they turned it on when someone like the Donald Trump came into the world, and they turned on all their assets, and they started their media propaganda, and they started telling you, this is who you need to hate. These are bad people, and they're still doing it today. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but fortunately, we're seeing a lot of the world wake up now. We just saw Donald Trump in the Bronx, New York, unprecedented, and thousands of people show up in support of that. Our mainstream media here didn't know what to do with it at all. The only thing they're doing in America right now is labeling him as Hitler.
It's just impossible to understand how they can draw these long bows. But if you say a lie often enough, people will believe it. And that's obviously what's happened with Trump derangement syndrome.
Yes.
It's very, very disturbing. Now, looking at the clock, we're going to run out of time. So I might just switch gears now and ask you, you've got news to report on NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Can you tell us what's happened in relation to Ukraine and what he's saying?
Well, since we're limited for time, let me just say before I go into that, I think that the Ukraine situation is the most important story on planet Earth right now. Most people don't give too much attention to it. I know how it started with everybody backing Ukraine. Those people have disappeared. Put the Ukrainian flag in your bio. The mainstream media has brainwashed people to think Putin is the bad guy. He invaded Ukraine for no reason at all. But you have to know your history. This goes all the way back to the Cold War, and this is all about NATO. You talk about Stoltenberg today, and he announced today about it's time for NATO. This is unbelievable. It is time for NATO to start using weapons provided by NATO in the U.S., in launching them into Russia. It is the unthinkable thing. I have to tell folks right now that this is no game. If NATO steps in, I think people what they need to understand is they need to take Putin by his word. I have been accused of being pro-Russian, a Putin puppet, and all that other stuff. And I don't care about that. I like the facts. I pay attention to what's going on, the events that are happening in the world. NATO is a threat to this planet right now. And if you look at it, I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump needs to do when he comes in is he needs to get rid of NATO. We are staring down the barrel, not only at World War III, because let me tell you something, World War III will not be long-lived. We're talking about nuclear war, and that is just the unthinkable. And we're looking at that right now. There's so much that I can go into, and I understand we're limited for time, but the masses, the people have been lied to about what the truth is coming out of Ukraine. And right now, you do not have a legitimate president, and they are literally going on the streets, pretty much using violence and beating people to recruit them because they are running out of soldiers. It's over in Ukraine right now. I'm telling the world right now, it is over. The only thing left is for NATO to step in, and that is the unthinkable.
You know, there were reports last year, if you can believe it, a year ago, where the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, was told that Ukraine cannot win this conflict. And then we see only a week ago, he's playing his guitar and singing for freedom. I don't know what it takes to think that you can be in a position of power and authority and completely deceived to the point that you're going to try and get on stage and sing your way out of this particular situation. It's beyond nasty. It's unthinkable in so many ways. So I guess the real question to follow is, are we witnessing, and I do talk about this, but from your perspective, are we witnessing the fall of Rome, the end of the Western Empire as we know it?
Well, that is what it looks like on the surface right now. And that is the very scary thing to look at. One, that is why it's so important for Donald Trump to get back in. I know we shouldn't put all our hopes on one man or put him on a pedestal, but unfortunately, right now, I really believe in my heart that he is the only man to get back in as far as being the U.S. president and make that change. I am a firm believer that his first 4 years was exposing the swamp. Maybe this falls down to conspiracy theory, but I think with the stolen election, in my opinion, it was the stolen election. It had to be that way. The world needed to see on the grand stage a Biden administration and doing what they're doing, because you couldn't tell people, and this is how they're showing them. So it's been almost 4 years of absolute mind-blowing, unthinkable hell. It's hurting Americans, especially in the economy right now, in every way, put it that way. And I personally think that, again, Donald Trump is that key to get in here and make that change as far as it goes in the United States and globally around the world. And I think as well, for him to do that, one of the first things besides closing the border, he needs to sit down with Putin, Xi Jinping, Saudi Arabia, and everyone needs to come to the table. And I believe they can do that. There can be a better world waiting for us out there. But right now, we need to get through this storm. And right now, unfortunately, I have a bad feeling that they're going to use Ukraine as an unfortunate incident to affect the entire planet, even the U.S. election.
This is, of course, you're not alone in worrying like you're saying there, and it's interesting, isn't it, Bruce, that we talked at the beginning of this hour about COVID instilling fear in so many different people around the world and making them act in certain ways, and here we are in the independent media fearing a NATO invasion to spark a World War III. Yet the rest of the world seemingly is oblivious because this is not what they're getting shown, and they feel like with NATO and the US that that they can do anything and they'll always win a war. But this is far from the reality. The US doesn't really have such a great record. If you go back to Vietnam, you look at Afghanistan, goodness me. This is not going to be as simple as most people think. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. They don't want a war. And so what we're living with now in this very unique time in history is that the little man or woman on the street is allowed to speak out about what bothers them in a way, because the new news is forming before their very eyes. And I feel like there's a real adjustment. It's one thing to report facts, but it's another one to then say, well, what do we do with said facts if we're going to rebuild the world post this election and take it away from the Western establishment that is harming the planet rather than making it better?
Yes. I think one of the most important things is, as far as the future goes, I think right now, as far as independent journalism is, we're here, we're reporting the truth, we're trying to get the facts out, battling censorship in a massive way. And then the future, I've always said, I have myself personally, I have a plan. I have like a 5-year plan, like every business would. It's so important for the independent media, the independent journalists who are doing what they're doing now, at least the credible ones, and people know who's credible, to keep going. This is the future. We cannot allow mainstream media to take over again, not only our airways, but the human consciousness. We can't allow it anymore.
Certainly, there wouldn't be a single person watching or listening that wouldn't agree with you there, and this being the whole point. But if we've learned anything from the COVID era, is that the mainstream news is as bad as the political establishment, in that it seems to be this circular system here, that they feed us a bad press release, we go down that pathway, we double down, we triple down, and we continue, and all of that is coming unstuck here. So we're in a situation that it's one thing, we need to get to the US election, there needs to be a change of government, and then there needs to be the process of unraveling what happened over the last 4-8 years even, to be able to bring justice and accountability first and foremost, not just to politicians, but to the people that gave bad information to politicians who equally did not want to scrutinise, who didn't do their jobs properly. So there needs to be a massive clean out of all the institutions, not just in the US, but all around the world. And it's this institutional failure that has led us to where we are today. And in the way I like to summarise that is the greatest breach of trust we've ever seen, certainly in our lifetimes, Bruce.
Yes, I can completely agree with that. As far as, me being in the U.S., I tell people all the time, this is bigger than just the United States. This is a global situation that is going on right now. That's why it's so important when Donald Trump comes in, God willing, that he comes in, and we need to work together with all these countries and take down these establishments, especially in the United States. We need to gut the DOJ, the FBI, and everything else. And me just saying stuff like that, in my own mind thinks, the men in black are going to show up at my front door just for reporting something like this. And I have heard stories like that before, and it's unbelievable. But we have to live without fear. Even the people who are sharing on social media, share the truth.
Well said. Now, Bruce, we have run out of time, so very, very quickly, just let people know how they can find you.
Yes, you can find me at Real Bruce Snyder. That's Real Bruce Snyder on X, on many platforms as well. Unfortunately, I can't give you my handle on Facebook because I get shut down all the time, and I have 40-some accounts. And you can find me at Bruce Snyder Mindfix TV on Rumble for my podcasts.
There you go. We have to go to a break, and we'll be back with more. Don't go anywhere. You're watching and listening to Weekends here on TNT.